Cristina Zenato knelt on the sandy ocean floor off Grand Bahama Island, surrounded by shadows that moved like slow, deliberate thoughts. Caribbean reef sharks circled her in that unhurried way they have, patient, curious, watchful. She had been here countless times before, in this underwater world where she felt more at home than anywhere on dry land. But today, something was different. One shark kept passing closer than the others. Cristina recognized her immediately. Foggy Eye, named for the cloudy film that covered one damaged eye. She had known this shark for years, had watched her grow from a cautious youngster into a confident adult. Now Foggy Eye's movements seemed troubled, uneasy. As the shark glided past, her mouth opened slightly, and Cristina caught a glint of something metallic lodged deep inside, far beyond the lips, buried where most people would never think to look, let alone reach. A fishing hook. Cristina felt the weight of water pressing down on her, heard the rhythm of her own breathing through the regulator. Around her, the other sharks bumped against her chainmail suit, a protective layer she wore not because she feared these animals, but because she respected what they were. Wild creatures capable of accidental harm, no matter how gentle their intentions. Foggy Eye circled back and brushed deliberately against Cristina's hip. It was the kind of touch that seemed almost purposeful, as if the shark were saying, "Notice me? Please." In that moment, Cristina faced a choice that would make most people's blood run cold. She could swim away and let the shark suffer with that hook embedded in its flesh, or she could do what she had trained herself to do over decades of diving. She could reach inside a shark's mouth and try to help. She signaled to her team, planted her knees firmly in the sand, and extended her gloved hand toward Foggy Eye as the shark turned back to face her. What happened next would require something that sounds impossible, putting a predator to sleep with nothing but a gentle touch. To understand how a person can safely reach inside a shark's mouth, you first need to know about a phenomenon called tonic immobility. It sounds scientific, and it is, but watching it happen feels like witnessing something almost magical. Sharks have tiny jelly-filled pores clustered around their snouts called the ampullae of Lorenzini. These remarkable sensors detect electrical fields in the water, the faint signals given off by the heartbeat of a fish hiding in the sand or the muscle contractions of nearby prey. When stimulated in just the right way, these sensors can trigger a state of deep relaxation in the shark, almost like a trance. Cristina had spent years learning this technique. She extended a steady hand toward Foggy Eye's snout and began to rub those sensitive pores with the gentleness you might use to soothe a nervous dog. Gradually, the powerful predator's movements slowed. The shark's body began to relax, then tilt, drifting into that strange, peaceful state between waking and sleep. With practiced care, Cristina eased Foggy Eye into a vertical position, resting the shark's head in her lap, with its tail pointing toward the distant, shimmering surface above. Her own heartbeat was loud in her ears. Even in stillness, she could feel the shark's weight and power. Tonic immobility is not magic. It's a fragile window of calm with a wild animal, and that window can close without warning. Around them, other sharks continued to circle, bump, and investigate. Her team watched closely, ready to intervene if something went wrong. Cristina retrieved her pliers from her gear. She knew she might have only seconds to reach deep inside that mouth, past rows of serrated teeth, before Foggy Eye snapped out of the trance. She leaned in closer, her diving visor inches from those teeth, and began to work. Later, sitting on the boat with the Bahamian sun warming her shoulders, Cristina would try to explain what made Foggy Eye different from the dozens of other sharks she knew by name. It wasn't just the clouded eye that made her recognizable. It was the shark's personality. Foggy Eye had always been a regular visitor to these waters, appearing on the edge of the group during Cristina's dives, circling a little differently from the others. Over the years, a kind of familiarity had developed between them, the way it sometimes does between people and the animals they see every day. But recently, Cristina had noticed a change. Foggy Eye started approaching her more directly, brushing along her side, lingering near her hip every time she entered the water. At first, Cristina wondered if it was just curiosity. Sharks are more inquisitive than most people realize. Then she saw the pattern. The shark wasn't just approaching. She was nudging, tilting her head as if pointing toward her own mouth. It was body language, repeated dive after dive. "Look here. Something is wrong." Cristina thought about the old family dog she'd had as a girl, the way it would limp over and press its sore paw into her hand without making a sound. Animals can't speak our language, but that doesn't mean they can't communicate. Trust and hope need no words. Once she finally spotted the hook buried deep inside Foggy Eye's mouth, Cristina understood. The odd behavior wasn't random. It was a plea. For Cristina, Foggy Eye was no longer just a shark. She was a specific patient whose pain could not be ignored, a friend who had come to her for help. Back underwater, with Foggy Eye resting in her lap in that strange, trance-like state, Cristina worked quickly, but carefully. She could feel how deeply the hook was embedded. The shark's jaw muscles twitched around her hand, a reminder that this moment of stillness was borrowed time. With her pliers, she gripped the metal and pulled. There was resistance, then a sudden give as the hook tore free. Foggy Eye snapped awake. The shark's body surged forward, slipping from Cristina's lap in a flurry of movement. For a heartbeat, Cristina was surrounded by confusion, tails thrashing, bodies turning. But there was no attack. The sharks simply reformed their slow, circling pattern, calm as clouds drifting across a summer sky. Then something unexpected happened. Foggy Eye swam off a short distance, paused, and curved back. She glided along Cristina's side and pressed gently into her hip. That same familiar touch, but different now, softer, as if the shark were testing her own mouth and saying, in whatever way a shark can say such things, "It's over. Thank you." Cristina looked at the blood-stained hook in her hand. Later, on land, she would add it to a container she keeps in her home, a simple box that holds an extraordinary collection. She calls it her box of hope. Inside are hundreds of fishing hooks, twisted, rusted, corroded by salt water. Each one was pulled from the mouth or body of a shark she helped. Each one represents pain relieved, suffering ended, a life given back to the sea. When Cristina speaks to schools and community groups, she brings the box of hope with her. She pours the hooks out onto a table so they clatter into a pile that makes people gasp. It's physical proof of something most of us never see, the debris of human carelessness and the possibility of healing. Foggy Eye's hook landed among all the others, turning a symbol of harm into a token of hope. Cristina Zenato was born in Italy, but found her calling in the warm, clear waters of the Bahamas. She came to Grand Bahama Island as a young woman, drawn by the promise of adventure and the mysterious pull of the deep. Her early days working with sharks were far from graceful. There were clumsy attempts to approach animals that wanted nothing to do with her, moments of panic when a shark moved too fast or too close. But she was patient the way you have to be when you're learning something that really matters. And gradually, she began to understand. Sharks, she discovered, are not the mindless killers of movie fame. They have personalities. They recognize individuals, both other sharks and the humans who visit their waters. They remember. Over the years, Cristina became known as a shark behaviorist, someone who studies their patterns, recognizes them as individuals, and notices the subtle changes that signal something is wrong. She gave names to the sharks she came to know: Grandma, an older shark with a slower, dignified glide; Stompy, energetic and bold; and, of course, Foggy Eye. She built a daily rhythm around her underwater family, teaching new divers, preparing gear, giving educational talks, then returning to the water where the sharks gathered around her like old friends at a reunion. When people ask her to explain what she does, Cristina keeps it simple. "It's like pulling a thorn from a dog's paw," she says. "Any animal lover would understand. You see something suffering, and if you can help, you help." Her dedication has earned her recognition far beyond the islands. She is a member of the Women Divers Hall of Fame and the Explorers Club, honors that reflect decades of work beneath the waves. But for Cristina, the real reward comes every time she enters the water and sees familiar dorsal fins cutting toward her through the blue. She isn't chasing thrills, she's checking on friends who might be hurting. The waters around Grand Bahama Island are part of something hopeful, a shark sanctuary established in 2011 when the Bahamian government banned all shark fishing in its waters. On paper, it sounds like a triumph, a safe haven where these ancient creatures can live without fear of hooks and nets. The reality is more complicated. Sharks don't read maps. They don't know where protected waters end and danger begins. They migrate vast distances, swimming through international waters where fishing boats operate freely. And some boats simply ignore the law, slipping into the sanctuary under cover of darkness to set their lines. So even here, in these protected waters, Cristina meets sharks bearing fresh wounds, hooks embedded in their jaws, fishing line tangled around their gills, scars that tell stories of narrow escapes. On one dive, she spotted a newcomer, an unfamiliar Caribbean reef shark trailing a length of fishing line that had wrapped around its gill slits. As she approached to help, the shark jerked away, panicked by the drag and pain of that tangled line. Not every rescue attempt succeeds on the first try. Sometimes the best you can do is try again tomorrow. Cristina uses these moments to teach the divers who visit. She explains how a single hook lost at sea can haunt a living creature for years. She talks about the fishing gear that travels on currents, drifting from one ocean to another, waiting to snag whatever crosses its path. A sanctuary is just a line on a map, she tells them. The animals still carry our carelessness with them, no matter where they swim. At sunset, when the day's diving is done and the boat rocks gently at anchor, Cristina rinses her chainmail suit and watches the colors fade from the sky. She thinks about how far the sharks must travel to escape our hooks and how few of them truly can. Something strange began happening after Cristina helped Foggy Eye. More sharks with hooks started showing up in her area. At first, it was just one, a shark she didn't recognize, arriving from deeper water, swimming straight toward her with a hook jutting from its jaw. Cristina managed, with patience and tonic immobility, to remove it. Then another appeared on a different day. And another? These weren't sharks she knew. They were strangers, arriving from somewhere else, behaving as if they already understood the routine. Approach the woman in chainmail, lean in, wait, and trust. Cristina began to suspect a pattern. It was as though word had spread among the sharks, information passed in whatever way these creatures communicate, that there was a safe place where a human would help instead of harm. She doesn't claim to have scientific proof. "I can't prove they're talking to each other," she says, "but I believe they share information in their own way, about danger, about food, and maybe about help." Her dive team watched in amazement as sharks began lining up, one after another, each presenting their wounds. Grandma, Stompy, Foggy Eye, they circled peacefully while Cristina worked on yet another newcomer, a living assembly line of trust. It was a kind of miracle, if you believe in such things, a domino effect of faith sparked by one shark who had learned that this particular human could be trusted and who had somehow passed that knowledge on. Cristina's work beneath the waves eventually led her to create something above them, a non-profit organization called People of the Water. The mission is simple: change the way people think about sharks. When she speaks to students, divers, and community groups, she brings the box of hope. She places it on a table and pours out the hooks, letting them clatter into a pile that shocks the audience into silence. Then she tells them about Foggy Eye, about Grandma and Stompy, about the sharks that came to her for help, and the trust that made healing possible. These aren't movie monsters, she tells them. They're animals that feel pain, that trust, that remember. They keep our oceans in balance. Without them, the whole ecosystem starts to fall apart. People of the Water focuses on training, education, and research. The goal is to equip more people with the knowledge and empathy they need to protect these misunderstood creatures. Every dive, every school visit, every conversation is a chance to shift fear into understanding. Cristina has a special message for people of a certain age, those who have watched the world change over decades, who remember when the oceans seemed inexhaustible and the horizon held nothing but promise. You've seen what we've lost, she says, but you've also seen what we can save. You can be a voice for the sea by supporting protections, by reducing plastic, by telling your grandchildren the truth about sharks. You don't have to dive into the ocean to make a difference. You just have to care. On a later dive, months after the hook was removed, Cristina saw a familiar shape gliding toward her through the blue water. Foggy Eye. The shark moved with an easy, pain-free motion, her clouded eye still marking her as unmistakably herself. She circled once, then brushed against Cristina's hip with that familiar affection. The same gesture she had used to ask for help, now transformed into something like a greeting between old friends. Cristina hovered in the blue, surrounded by sharks, one small human who had chosen to answer their silent pleas. One hook, one shark, one story at a time. Perhaps that's all any of us can do. Notice the suffering in front of us, reach out with whatever skills we have, and trust that compassion, like word among sharks, will spread further than we can see.